We all lined up and walked out onto the Arusha airport tarmac from our gate and headed to our small plane set to take us to Zanzibar. It didn't take that long to board. It probably took us about 15 minutes of that. For such a small plane, it was pretty loud standing next to it, but it wasn't that bad. Once on board, we found our seats, buckled in, and relaxed for our short 1 hour and 20-minute flight. Upon arrival, we were picked up by our driver, David. He would take us to our resort at the Gold Zanzibar Beach House and Spa. The resort was beautiful, probably one of the nicest resorts we've stayed at. The entrance was open and airy, and the staff was great. When we walked through the entrance, they made sure we felt very welcome. The grounds were nice and green with beautiful plant life everywhere you turned. We arrived just before sunset, so that definitely made things even more beautiful. As we walked, we were excited to see how nice of a room we had. We remembered the pictures, but sometimes, as we've learned in the past, pictures just do not tell the whole story. You never know what you're going to get until you actually walk through the door. And when we opened that door, we were relieved because the room was much better than the pictures online. There was plenty of space. They had the bed nice and decorated with the towel sculpture and rose petals. The bathroom was a good size, plenty of room. We didn't use the tub, but I'm sure it was great as well. The next morning, we woke up early, had some breakfast, and set off for one of our most anticipated destinations, Cheetah Rock. This place was really hidden away. It felt as if we were arriving at some secret location. Everything felt like it was buried deep in a forest. As we headed to our first stop, we walked by a tiger. We would stop and see this guy a little later in the tour. But before we did, we made sure we all got a few good pictures along the way. Our first stop was to spend some time with a couple of bush babies. We all gathered around the edge of the cage, and the handlers brought them out. They loved to nibble on little pieces of macaroni pasta, and that's what they gave us to feed them. They would go right down the line, crawling over people to get at the pasta as you held it in your hand. Their fur was so soft too. It had the feel of a fluffy, short-haired cat, like a British Grey. I just wanted to put them in my pocket and take them home with me. They were so cute. The vervet monkeys were an experience I'll never forget. These little guys were so rambunctious. I didn't know what to do other than sit there and let them have their way with me. They were also interested in my camera and the pole it was attached to. Just watch.
Some of the guests, they started complaining about this gentleman. So the hotel staff, they decided to corner him, and they managed to confiscate Diva away from him. Now, ladies and gents, Diva's previous owner would take Diva, walk into these hotels and use Diva to get one of the guests' attention. Once he got their attention, he would try to sell them blue safaris or spice tours. They told him got in touch with us and they asked us if we were willing to take Viva in. There are some days where we kind of feel like we made a mistake.
How old are they?
So the oldest one in where we kind of feel like we made a mistake. So the oldest one in here is Mariella. I would say Mariella's close to 3 years now. She's the one. Kom agter hulle byt meer en meer wat hulle kry meer reacties as wat ek. Ladies and gents, last monkey in this enclosure. Little Daniela over here on the camera. Last monkey in this enclosure. Little Daniela over here on the camera. Daniela's another rescue.
Our next stop was with the lemurs. They were also playful, but we were warned about one particular, and her name was Passion. We were all warned and given specific instructions on how to deal with her if she hops on your shoulder. And when she did, I made sure to follow them. Apparently, she's bitten people's faces while on their shoulders. We were told to extend our arm with the food and look the other direction, being sure not to make eye contact because she could see that as a threat. The next stop was everyone's most anticipated one, and that was to see a cheetah and get the opportunity to interact with one. We all lined up to pet the cheetah, and the handler let him loose. And we were told to be very still and not make any sudden moves. When our turn arrived, we made sure we took advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. One of the handlers showed us how they fed their lions. I was worried he was going to lose a finger or a hand. I know I couldn't do it. Here was another white lion. They had otters too. The next day, we had a tour guide take us through Stown Town. The drive was about 1 hour. We started the tour just outside the market. There were so many people outside. We arrived during rush hour apparently, and everybody was all business. Not a smile in sight. Inside, they had all types of different meats, fruits, vegetables, spices, grains, you name it. They had it. You just had to make sure you knew where to go. The inner streets were just as busy. Shops were lined up and down every street you turned. You couldn't walk down a street without seeing people going to and from. It seemed like everyone had somewhere to go. The buildings were very old as well. Some of them looked like they were going to crumble to the ground. It was kind of concerning, but I'm sure the buildings were okay. They wouldn't be doing business in them if they weren't. And this is St. Joseph's Cathedral, a Catholic church that was finished in 1897, 30 years after the construction started. Like many Catholic churches, it was very Gothic and old, but beautiful at the same time. Our guide took us to the old fort next. It was built by Omani Arabs after expelling the Portuguese in 1699. It was used as a garrison and prison in the 19th century and as a terminal of the Zanzibar Railways from 1905 to 1928. A new guardhouse was built in 1947 and used as the ladies' club, and an amphitheater was added in the 1990s. It is now the headquarters of the Zanzibar International Film Festival. In the early 20th century, it was also used as a depot during the construction of the railway that connected Stown Town to the village of Bububu. Inside the courtyard, there are some remnants of earlier buildings, including those of a Portuguese church. We continued walking around the corner of the fort and headed over to the Forodani Plaza. And when we got there were a lot of people trying to get tourists to purchase items they were selling. They didn't approach us though, probably because they saw we had a guide with us already. So we just continued on. The view of the shore was nice. There were so many small boats in the water, and I noticed many of them were for tourists. After the plaza, we headed over to the building that Freddie Mercury once lived in. It was turned into a museum and officially inaugurated as one in 2019. Freddie used to live here with his family before they moved to England in 1963. This is a very popular tourist location, and the cars driving by would honk in frustration with all the tourists standing around in the way of traffic. I didn't blame them. I would be irritated too. Our last day in Zanzibar was a relaxation day. We got up early, had some breakfast, and headed out to the beach. Some Maasai tribe members were at the beach every single day trying to get people to buy some of their wooden plaques with your own name carved in it. They hounded us so much about buying one that we just gave in and bought one eventually. And we were glad we did because they were actually pretty nice. We also rented a jet ski and had some fun. The water was nice and cool and it felt good sitting under the warm sun. And when the sun goes down, it makes for some unbelievable skies, especially when there's a light hint of cloud cover near the horizon. I met a lady on the beach who was selling scarves. I saw her quite frequently during our stay. Every day she was out on the beach trying to sell her scarves to tourists who venture out to the water. You cannot walk up to the waters of the beach without being stopped by someone trying to sell you something. It was constant. I ended up buying one of her scarves for my wife. They were actually pretty nice and of good quality too. I gave her $5 and she was happy with the sale. As the sun begins to set, the beach becomes more active. The sunsets here are very popular. Everyone seems to come out of nowhere to watch the day begin its reset. It really is quite a sight. Here, the same Maasai men begin to practice their ritual dancing. We, along with many other guests, just sat back in our beach loungers and watched them. Then the nightlife began, and this included some musical performances and dancing. This was one of 5 different performances we saw in the evenings during our stay. I would love to show you the Michael Jackson performance we saw, but it's not possible due to copyrights. The dancing was great. Having a front row seat was definitely an experience. My wife was pulled up during the performance to join in. It was fun watching everyone shake and wiggle. Even though the dances were suggestive, it was still very interesting to see how different cultures here in Zanzibar dance. Our time in Zanzibar sadly had to come to an end. We packed up, headed to the airport, and took our 5-hour flight directly into Doha, Qatar, where we would stay for about 20 hours before our next flight back to the States. The plan upon arrival was to get a few hours of sleep at a hotel, wake up, have some breakfast, and get ready for our tour of Doha. And what an interesting tour it would turn out to be.